Sometimes topics and subjects just land perfectly in your lap. In my case, the subject of downsizing and less is more definitely rings true. This is the last time you're ever going to see me recording in this studio, the last time you're going to see this cupboard. And it also plays perfectly into the collecting space, and especially the Rolex Explorer 1. So let's get into it. So a few days ago, I stumbled on an article written by Monochrome watches, and the subject was about downsizing. When I saw the title, I thought to myself, it had to do with reducing watches in your collection in favor of watches that you prefer to wear more often. You know, that's what downsizing means to me. But it was in fact about the scale of the watches and bringing watches' sizes down. And this article got me thinking, because I have been in the process of downsizing my collection. And I've also chosen a couple of watches that have stayed. And of the few watches in the collection that remain, one of them is this, the Smith's Everest Gilt Dial 36mm. And it made me think why. Why is this watch still in my collection? And fitting to this subject, talking about the Explorer 36, it has to do with the watch's size, its presence on the wrist, and sometimes having a smaller watch isn't a bad thing. A couple of years ago, when the Explorer 36 arrived on the scene, was quite an interesting time, because we were still very much attuned to looking at the Explorer 39 as the only option. And the fact that Rolex seemed to have backtracked and gone down to the original size again, it angered some and it pleased many. And like a delayed fuse, I think so many people are looking back at this watch now impressed. The appreciation for a modern 36mm size has returned. The root of the argument, I think, is that a smaller size can be fantastic. And sharing what's on my wrist today is something a little bit special. Omega Seamaster 57 on an OEM Omega mesh. Part of the process of selling off my collection meant that I had some money aside, and I thought, let's dress up this watch a little bit more. Let's have some fun with a classic mesh, and it really has not disappointed. It changes the wearing experience completely. We could say that this watch factors into the equation too, because I have pieces in my collection from 43mm down to 35, and this being the sweet spot at 39mm, that in between. Sometimes a smaller size just makes for an easier wearing experience. Some of you may know that a few years back I had an extended period of time, about 6 months, experiencing the Explorer 39mm, and I didn't really gel with the watch. It mainly had to do with its size and its proportions. It just never felt 100% right on me. To each their own, of course, but the experience taught me a lot about the quality of Rolex's manufacturing and how tight the tolerances are, and how comfortable the watch is to wear. There were also a few aesthetic things, like the dial felt too big, and the watch, presentation-wise, felt a bit too flat. So seeing this 36mm arrive was a big surprise. I don't think any of us were expecting it. But you know, the more I look into it, the more I hear about the testimonials and the experience from fellow wearers, the more I feel compelled to experience this watch myself. I think what the 36mm Explorer epitomizes, especially in this modern configuration, is that Rolex had a sweet spot that they have now returned to. And with it, they have injected this watch with modern tech. They have widened the lugs to differentiate it from the earlier generations. And it ends up being a watch that looks new but also classic. And where a few days ago I made a subject discussing Rolex and how the brand seems to be moving away from and deferring from their tool watch origins in favor of luxury and prestige, the Explorer 1 still manages to bring across this image of being a watch built for purpose. And I doubt there are many people out there who would deny that this watch manages to transcend the image that Rolex seemed to have created for itself in its modern catalog. For many years, as enthusiasts, we have spoken about the perfect one watch. And a part of its characteristics is that it needs to be a watch that can be worn every day, that doesn't draw attention to itself, it remains under the radar, unpretentious. At a 36mm size, the beauty is that it does manage to fit a majority of wrists, and it doesn't look out of place. It's the kind of watch to be put on and worn in any circumstance, whether you're at the office, whether you're at the gym, climbing a mountain, going for a bike ride. That is the joy of a watch like this, and I think the size factors in greatly. On the subject of downsizing again, talking about removing watches out of a collection, slimming down to only a handful, it fascinates me that there are some watches out there that are so small in stature but manage to do so much and achieve so much, kind of like David and Goliath. Not much is expected of them, but they always manage to exceed expectations, and that's what I think the 36mm Explorer has managed to do. Maybe I am buying into the story, the background, the history, but it's a watch that continues to impress. Every single time I look at it, I think, there is something to this watch, and you can't really say that about too many pieces from brands. The simplest watch that the brand offers also seems to be the most sophisticated. Try and say that 5 times. Now onto the subject of bringing watch sizes down. Many are saying that watches are all going in the same direction of finding that sweet spot of 39mm, 40mm, but I think it's different in all areas. There is definitely a continuing trend and a push to create smaller sized watches for male and female audiences. Now look, where I'm sitting, I'm all for diversity. I love a bigger watch like a diver when I want to see it in the dark easier, but sometimes I prefer a smaller watch that's inconspicuous, that can go under a sleeve and you can wear and not think about. And I do love the fact that the Explorer 36 seems to have hit all of these hallmarks well. Presentation-wise, it's easy to read no matter the lighting, but with its size and stature, it's also small enough in profile that it can go unnoticed. And of all the watches in Rolex's modern catalog, its modern lexicon, the Explorer 1 continues to be a watch favored by the enthusiast and the new time wearer. I find it to be a piece that has this stunning convergence across multiple fields. No matter what area, no matter what niche, what wrist size you have, whether or not Rolex is a brand that you're even remotely interested in, this watch still has the potential of pulling at your heartstrings. Today, that is so difficult to do, with the amount of watches that are available to all of us. Safe to say that the 36mm Explorer has managed to do a lot of things. In its modern configuration, it's a darling, it's appreciated worldwide. It does away with the glitz and glamour in favor of staying true to its roots, apart from the two-tone model, which is an interesting talking point all to itself. On one hand, I do love the fact that it's a gilt dial and it's calling back to those original inspirations, but it's also in two-tone, and for an Explorer's watch, doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I feel like the watch and all of its characteristics, it's attractive enough. The story, whether you believe it or not, is one thing, but the size of the watch, the way it wears on a wrist, the way it can be utilized on a daily basis, that's what allows it to stay. That's what I believe has given this watch the ability to win over the hearts and minds of its wearers. And even though it's the most basic, the most simple, the most boring, I think a lot would say, I find it to be a special watch. One of the few Rolex models that truly sustains and manages to give you more and more. No matter your age when you get this watch, it'll never be frowned upon. No matter the time when you receive it, it will still be relevant. And in our world today, where the subject matter of less is more, this principle and understanding of living is something that we strive towards, a watch like this epitomizes that belief far more than many others do. The subject of downsizing and this theme of smaller watches, it all just seemed to fit perfectly for this video because I have been downsizing my life quite a lot over the last couple of weeks. And it's made me think a lot about what is important in your life, what is necessary. In my case, getting rid of the watches that I don't wear in favor of watches that have been with me in some of the most important moments. I am leaving this house and the studio that I'm currently in. This configuration I don't think will change very much, but the new place I'm going to, I hope the room's big enough that I'll be able to present properly. But the last 2 months have been very difficult this side. I've kept the personal stuff away from the channel. I hate drama. I hate talking about all those things, but it's been rough. Family related, the worst kind of family related news. Partly the reason why I've had to sell off a portion of my collection. So yeah, lots of things have changed, but not much is going to change for you. It's going to change for me. It's amazing. It's been over a year since I started recording and presenting in this style, presenting to a camera, presenting to you as an audience as a face. And it's been a lot of fun. Like, I've met people out in the wild and they've been so great. You guys are fantastic. It's such an honor and a privilege being able to present and share ideas and thoughts with you. And the fact that someone is out there listening to me, it's amazing. It really is. And my dad would always say, continue with your gifts. For the last time, signing off in the original studio. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me. And here's to the next chapter.